Art is a very subjective thing. For a long time, there was a general difficulty in getting the public to see video games as anything more than just silly little things in arcades meant to distract your kids for a few hours. But with home consoles came the potential for more impactful stories, more involved gameplay, more striking visuals, even just more games overall that required saving and loading to beat. And in 2005, a game hit the market that solidified the medium as a valid form of storytelling and visual artistry for all time. And that game was Shadow of the Colossus. Directed by Fumito Ueda, Shadow of the Colossus was a mysterious, esoteric game at its launch. Hot on the heels of Ueda's last project, Ico, fans were eager to see what else he had in store, with the beautiful and gripping game they'd just played fresh on their minds. And boy did Shadow of the Colossus deliver. The first thing a player would notice on starting the game would be the visuals. Naturally, the game opens to gorgeous, wistful music and a shot of a bird flying over a canyon. We're quickly introduced to our protagonist who's guiding his horse across perilous cliffs. Later, the body of a woman is placed on an altar, and a disembodied voice commands the protagonist to slay 16 colossi that roam the lands. And so it begins. The thing about this game is that it's entirely boss fights and traveling to boss fights. While there is a huge open world to explore, there's nothing to find save for the occasional lizard or fruit that can increase your stats. No enemies, no NPCs, no side quests, no treasures, just open fields, sweeping valleys, impassable canyons, and the occasional save point in the form of a shrine. The game is truly just you, your horse, and your target. And it couldn't be better. A world this large, this beautiful, but this empty? It's confusing, it's compelling, it makes you want to know exactly what's going on. You can decide where to go, but the colossi won't wake up unless it's time to fight them. You can explore every corner, every inch of the world, but you'll have nothing to show for it save for the satisfaction of being there. So are you really free to explore? Is there anything to gain? Well, depends how you look at it. There's a deep serenity to traveling this game's world, juxtaposed by the genuine fear and intensity of its battles. You cross idyllic landscapes with nothing to hear but the beat of hooves and the blowing of wind. Aside from the few cutscenes there are, sound cues and music pieces are only heard in proximity to a colossus. Maybe this is a way of expressing the import of the protagonist's mission, or maybe just a stylistic decision meant to differentiate traveling and fighting. But the result for me is that the player remembers those moments of travel. All the little in-betweens stick out. Passing through forest glens, witnessing waterfall basins, traversing open deserts. Moments where your decision making is less important than just taking in the sights. Those are what stuck with me the most. It was like the game was trying to tell me to just let it go. That beating the colossi would never be as valuable as enjoying the world for what it is. That being in control couldn't hold a candle to going with the flow. Controls in this game are very freeform. Movement is omnidirectional, climbing is linked only to your stamina meter, and momentum is critical to success. Controls like these leave a lot of agency to the player. You are truly in control of where you go and what you do, but the colossi require certain tactics to beat. You could use a colossal sword swing to fling yourself into the air, using mastery of mechanics, timing, and physics to reach the beast's head in seconds. Or you could wait for it to smash its bracer open so you can climb through the slower, but very straightforward way. But whatever you do, you're heading to the same place. Your goal is the same and the outcome is the same. The colossus will die and its soul will be released, then violently knocking you unconscious. Now, fighting a Colossus can make you feel helpless and can make you feel unstoppable. No matter how many you've taken down, their thunderous footsteps will always remind you that they could crush you in an instant, that you're nothing more than an ant with a sword to them. It's a predetermined, unavoidable condition of the fight that by all means you should have no chance to win. And yet, through strategy and sweat, one will manage to reach the weak points and take the Colossi down every time, beating the odds and whatnot. This clash of freedom versus the predetermined, of loose improvised tactics versus unavoidable outcomes, speak to the very same themes evoked by the game's overworld. Are you in control at all? Do you really command what will happen next, or does it just feel like it? Is there even a point in seeking to gain control? The Colossi themselves are like living beings. The player can't conceptualize where they came from, just like people can't conceptualize the depth and length of lives other than their own. They'll try to shake you off, strike you down, shoot you with energy, whatever it takes to protect the soul of Dormin within them, because to them, that soul is their very life. What is the discernible difference between their jobs as prison guards and their fight for survival? The two are one and the same, and like any other living being, they have no choice but to fight as hard as they possibly can to survive. Again, we're led to question the very nature of control. When you look at the plot that's being presented here, you have Wander, this guy, trying to revive Mono, this lady, by following the commands of Dormin, this voice. Wander is rallying against the very rules of nature, against the permanence of death, but to do so, he has to follow a new set of rules, one that he's told he'll pay for dearly. And pay he does. Even by coming all this way, Wander can't escape the powers that be. The details of this story are largely up for interpretation. The director himself has said that he wants people to make it up for themselves. To me, this again speaks to the themes presented before. A pondering on the illusion of, or maybe the reality, of control. The story is less important than the meaning meant to be imparted on the player, which, to me, is about control. But still, it's fascinating to think about, and I really respect this level of artistry, so I'm going to take some time to tell you my interpretation of the story. And it has a lot to do with Ueda's first project, Ico. This will sound more coherent if you played that game too, but the games are intrinsically linked, so I'm going to do my best to make it make sense. Long in the past, Dormin was a malevolent creature who was imprisoned for his ability to control beings made of light. This could mean anything, namely controlling humans, but I think it means shadow monsters like those from Ico. If you have theories on Ico, you might be doubting me, but trust, it all comes around. Dormin's soul was split into 16 parts, each imprisoned in a Colossus as a living jail cell that served as its own guard. The ancient sword that Wander carries was used in the ritual to seal Dormin in the past, and so could be used to free him as well by slaying the Colossi. When Iman, this guy, resealed Dormin using the sword at the end of the game, Wander was pulled in as well, his consciousness being erased with Dormin's. As a side note, to further impress upon the player the helplessness of fighting fate that the whole game has been illustrating, you actually can control Wander as he gets sucked into the water, but all you can do is stumble around, only slightly delaying the inevitable. This is a story of rebellion, and the seemingly insurmountable walls that every rebel runs up against. Wander is no different, but, like others in history, rebellion can result in the occasional success. At this act, Dormin ceased to exist as he was known, now residing as a fragment of darkness in the soul of the horned baby that resulted from the sealing ritual. Though Dormin lost in the end, Wander's end of the bargain was still kept, and so Mono woke up from death. She took the baby up the temple looking for a way out, but found the bridge had collapsed, so she went to the secret garden where the game ends. An undisclosed but probably significant amount of time later, fragments of Dormin have somehow slipped away from the Forbidden Lands, with horned boys being born in the outside world. This is where we enter eco-theories. So you see, in Eco, the titular character is imprisoned in a castle for having horns. The guard sealing his cell does so using this particular sword, the Queen's sword, meaning he's doing this in service of her. Later in the game, you learn that same Queen has been sacrificing horned boys and controls the remnants of their souls, their shadows, as minions. Remember that line about controlling beings made of light? Shadows are only visible when there's light. Eco, if we're following the story of Shadow of the Colossus, should have a fragment of darkness in his soul that resulted in his horns. But Eco spends the whole game trying to save Yorda, the daughter of the Queen. He fights off the shadows, the souls of boys like him, and even goes as far as fighting the Queen herself for Yorda's freedom, even when offered the chance to leave and have his life spared. Eco, even with darkness in his very soul, is not bound or defined by it. He does what he believes is right, never giving up or acting selfishly. Eco's difference from Wander is that his situation is less absolute. The themes of his game center more around bravery in the face of uncertainty, rather than a losing battle against fate. There are many points where Eco shows that if he doesn't rescue Yorda, he's not getting out himself. His selflessness is the same as Wander's, giving everything he can to save an innocent soul. But as he's in a less tragic, less absolute circumstance, his fight produces a less tragic result. So I think the Queen, wherever she came from, harbors Dorman's power, or maybe the same kind of power, and uses horned boys like Eco and the baby to protect herself. This would make Shadow of the Colossus a prequel to Eco. It's the story of what happened to Eco's world in ancient times, of why there are horned boys and shadow monsters in the first place. Again, this is just my interpretation of the story. I've played both games and found what I believe to be the links between them. But if you go online searching for the truth, you're only going to find indirect answers from the director and countless arguments on Reddit about what really happened. So just take my answer. It's really good and I'm really smart, like super smart. Basically, Shadow of the Colossus is one of the best video games of all time. It's not a debate. It'll leave you amazed, breathless, crying, shaking, shouting, and cheering. It does it all. I feel like I experienced the full spectrum of human emotions playing this game. It's a privilege to experience, and every time I do so, I'm grateful for it. The soundtrack, the controls, the story being told, the world to explore, and the themes it presents, all of that creates an experience that I can only describe as uniquely impactful. It's a game I'll never forget and always recommend. If you have any appreciation for art and gaming, you owe it to yourself to play this one.